Radio Rahim here with Adam Smith. We are at day 2 of the build-up that will finally bring us to the fight I feel like we've been talking about our entire lives.
Yes, yeah, that's about right. Chris Eubank Jr. was one of my heroes as a teenager, and I had the privilege of working with him and Nigel for, I would say, the last third of their careers, so I know them both well. I had some time with Nigel earlier today. It's a shame Chris isn't around, but that's his choice. But yeah, we've been talking about the two names synonymous with British boxing history, 35 years since their first fight in Birmingham, and I think the Old Trafford fight, the second fight, was either 2 weeks before or 2 weeks after Ben Shalom was born. So it's a long, long time ago, and how ironic now Ben is promoting Chris, and Eddie with Conor. They've already had their sort of fun altercations. I saw your interview with them, and they're promoting a fight that doesn't need promoting, really. It's a huge one, and I can't wait to see it settled in the ring.
You mentioned your history with Chris Eubank Sr., which gives you an interesting and unique perspective on this new fight that is as close to a third fight as we're going to get from Eubank and Ben, with the narrative not playing out, I think, as the promoters would have hoped. I know it's difficult to talk about someone's family relationship and where the heart lies. However, what I don't think is being talked enough about maybe is the issues that Senior raises. Whether he's right to put his business in the street, if you would say that, with his son, the issue he raises about the weight divisions and everyone's safety, and then having walked with Michael and making that a point of how the dangerous fight game can be. Do you think he has a point there?
But firstly, I think it's a shame that he's not around. I think that we all wanted the two fathers, the two sons, but the most important thing is, without any hesitation, is the father-son relationship. There's been tragedy in the Eubank family. I knew Sebastian, lovely, lovely guy, and I think it's just a shame that obviously there's differences of opinions. Chris Senior isn't around his son, like Nigel's around Conor, so I think that's disappointing. But the most important thing is that father and son work out their relationship. That's the key. As far as what he's mentioning, Chris was obviously in the fight with Michael Watson, and Michael is an amazing man who bears no resentment. He's so humble, he's so generous with his love, and it's fantastic that he's almost brought Eubank Senior and Ben Senior together, almost like the three of them. Nigel as well was in a fight that was very, very difficult to come to terms with Gerald McClellan, which was probably his greatest performance, and yet, the aftermath saw Gerald in a very bad way, and that was, that's the dangers of boxing. That is the harsh reality. So I think they've both been touched by difficulties, Chris and Nigel. Look, the weight division is different. I think 2.5 years ago, I was slightly worried about it. Now I think Conor is more like middle. I think he's going to have to really work to get down to welter. He's talking about fighting for the world welterweight title after this business is dealt with. But I think he naturally walks around a bigger weight now. He's 28, so I think that is not as, maybe worrying's the wrong word, but not as big an issue as it was 2.5 years ago. I think, there's the rehydration clause. It is differing weight divisions, there's no doubt about that. But I think that Conor is, it's not like he's jumping from welterweight to middleweight. He's fought at light middle. He walks around as big as a middle. He's been sparring with light heavyweights.
So the concern,
I don't think it's as much of an issue as maybe it was a couple of years ago. But yeah, look, weight divisions are there for a reason. But the rules are in place. There's a rehydration clause, and they're trying to make it, for the fight, this fantasy fight, becoming reality, as safe as they can, and that's the most important thing, the health and safety of the fighters. And after what happened with Michael Watson, the British board and all the safety in British boxing and around the world has been improved hugely. Spencer Oliver's life in 1998 was saved because of the quick action in the ring, and that was all down to the aftermath and what happened beyond the Michael Watson tragedy. And unfortunately, we still have Michael with us today. But the health and safety is the most important thing, and that's what everyone would agree with. And the most important thing is that the two of them come out absolutely fine on Saturday night, and they're warriors, and that's what we want. We want a great fight. We want them to go home to their families, healthy and well.
You're one of the voices and personalities that have brought class to this sport for decades. When we hear you call fights and conduct press conferences, we know that there is another level of eloquence and class being brought to the stage and being brought to the apron. The other issue being raised by Eubank Sr. is the class in which fighters deal with other fighters, even in contentious fights like this. And it's nothing new to there to be some jaw-jacking back and forth and a push or a shove here, but it does seem to be more frequent and to be even escalating now to foreign objects. Do you feel like there has been a decline of class and procedure, if you will, in modern era?
Yeah, this will be a parliamentary procedure. I think we've always had shenanigans, as Chris called it yesterday, in this sport. We've had tables flipped over. We've had fences in the way of a weigh-in. We've had all sorts of fun and games, shall we say, in build-ups before. The egg smashing was a little step too far in terms of gentlemanly conduct, and Chris got fined for it, but has it just escalated this promotion? Of course it has. No one got hurt. Even Conor today was saying that it was quite a clever move from Chris. And so look, I think the most important thing for me is that the fighters respect each other, and as much as they don't like each other, they're never going to be friends per se, or who knows what life brings later on down the line, but certainly not for now. But they both respect each other hugely as fighters.
Do you think they respect the game? In other words, it's just not just down to them.
No,
but
I do think they respect the sport. I think they both train frenetically hard. They're both dedicated to the sport of boxing. They're both warriors. They've had a huge number of professional fights, amateur fights. I think they do respect the game, but sometimes there are high emotions, and sometimes there are things that occur, and one or two are premeditated, and one or two are just spur of the moment, and I think we have a bit of both. So look, and Chris Sr., remember, he brought his own unique drama to the sport, which is what I loved. I was actually more of a Eubank fan because it was theatre, because when he stood on that apron and he did the glove thing and the stuff that was coming out of it, this poetry and his eloquence and his oddities and his eccentric ways with the monocle and the cane, maybe he was bringing extra class, but he was bringing oddities and strangeness and, as I said, eccentricity to the sport. So, everybody's had their way of leaving their mark, from a Nassim Hamid to way back, obviously, with Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, and people were saying at that time, well, maybe he shouldn't be saying what he's saying, but everybody looks back at it now and thinks he was an absolute genius and wonderful to be around and phenomenal for the sport. So I think you've got to be authentic to yourself, and I think Chris Eubank Jr. is he's a businessman, and he's keeping the emotions out of it. He's cold and he's calculated and he's premeditated and he's doing it his way. And Conor's raw and more heart and more grit and more getting in your face. And I think that's their characters. And we love a story and we love polar opposites. So do I think there's not been enough class? I think they respect each other, and I think we'll let them off the egg smashing incident. I don't know what's going to happen this week though.
Something.
Yeah.
I'm expecting something. The amount of promotion that's gone into this fight, which you mentioned, and the emotion that's gone into this fight, I do think has changed the way people see this fight some 2 years on from its initial date. And when the fight was initially announced for the initial date, I do remember quite a few conversations being had about whether or not this was a mismatch, whether or not this fight should even be made. Is it a bit of a farce just on the name of the fathers? Not a whole lot has changed in regard to what these fighters have accomplished or what weight they are or who they are as technical ability. So has the hype actually been the thing to seem to close the gap? Or do you think these fighters are different than when the fight was initially announced?
I do. I think the fight's changed. I think first time around I thought Eubank was going to win fairly comfortably. Now I'm not so sure. He's been beaten by Liam Smith. He's been stopped. Yes, he exacted revenge on Liam, but Liam tells me he was really badly injured for that one. So Chris is now 35. I think Conor probably hasn't been active enough. He's had a lot of issues, obviously, to deal with outside of the ring, but he's probably matured more into the weight. So I think it is a different fight now. I think it's a fight that gives CONOR BENN more of a chance. I still think Chris is favourite going in, but I think it's a much more live fight than it was 2.5 years ago. I think it's a much more interesting fight.
Do you agree that if Chris Eubank Jr. can't beat CONOR BENN, that it's essentially over for him as a top-tier fighter?
We don't know yet. We don't know about the manner of what happens on Saturday night. If CONOR BENN stops him, I'm sure there'll be a rematch. So I don't think it'll be his end at the top, no. But I think he's already said that if CONOR BENN beats him, he'll look to retire. So there won't be much more at 35. I think he just wants the big money fights. So it will be a CONOR BENN rematch or out. I think if Chris loses, I think if Conor loses, I think he'll want to try and go again if it's even close. If not, he'll go back down to welter or light middle and crack on. He's 28.
Do you make much of the criticism that, well, since the scandal, it hasn't appeared that Conor's had the same punching power, that some people think he has a lesser chance now than he would have had the first time out? If he's not able to at least make this competitive or be successful on Saturday night, does that say anything about the trajectory of where CONOR BENN is going and what his potential future really is?
No, I think CONOR BENN has taken this fight because he wants to beat Chris Eubank Jr. badly. And I think that he's jumped the weight and taken the risk because Chris has fought at a much higher level. You know, those losses to Billy Joe Saunders, to George Groves, to Liam Smith, you know, they're all world champions or world-class fighters. You know, they're fantastic former world champions, or, you know, Liam wants to go again. So they're top level. And Conor hasn't operated at that class. So he's taking a massive jump, both in weight and in levels. But I take my hat off to him. That's what it's all about. He loves a challenge. And I think Conor's going to go into it and give it absolutely everything.
And lastly, we haven't had the announcement yet, but it's happening. We know we're going to get Dubois, Usyk too. We talk about rematches and how fights change from, year to year. We've seen this fight once. How does it differ, if it does, the next time out?
That's a good question. I think that Daniel Dubois has got real momentum. I think the wins over Baby Miller, Hrgovic, and especially, obviously, AJ last September. And at 27, Daniel Dubois is in the form of his life, and he's got that self-belief, possibly partly because of Don Charles, but also because of what he's been through. And he's asked himself a lot of questions, and he's answered them very, very positively. So I think Daniel Dubois goes into this with a much better chance than he did in Poland. The problem is, as you and I know, Alexander Usyk is the best fighter in boxing. He's undefeated in 23. He was the elite at cruiserweight. He's become the elite at heavyweight, and maybe most importantly, he's the best at rematches. So Usyk still stands as the guy to beat, but I think Daniel will really fancy that he's got a live chance, particularly of the controversial low blow, that he can try and become an undisputed champion at Wembley in the summer. I think it's fascinating to see what he can do after the Joshua thing. I think the one worry for me is that he didn't have that fight in February, and that it's been it'll be 10 months out of the ring for him, whereas Usyk fought in December. That's a slight worry for me going in. But I think Daniel Dubois, if he's in that sort of mood that he was in the night of AJ at Wembley, where he was not to be denied and he was laser focused and brilliant and brutal, I think we've got a great fight, haven't we?
I think we do, and we always have a great interview because once again you bring the class and you bring the eloquence. Radio Rahim with Adam Smith.